It's now 7 o'clock, so we'll call this Planning Commission to order. This is the Hastings Planning Commission. Today is August 12th, 2019, and this is a regular meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our July 22nd meeting. Commissioners, are there any corrections or additions? If not, do we have a motion for approval?
Motion for approval.
We have a motion, from Commissioner Barrs. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. This evening, we have a public hearing, ordinance amendment 2019-20, climate-controlled storage in the C4 zoning district. Mr. Hinsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as the chairman pointed out, we do have a ordinance amendment before us tonight to amend the C4 zoning code to allow climate-controlled storage within the C4 zoning district. Now, climate-controlled storage is defined as facilities such as a mini storage facility, but they're heated and cooled. So they provide storage for individuals, for extra items, etc. In a climate-controlled environment, it's done indoors. There's no outdoor storage. There's not the typical garage and gated-in area, the drive-in area that you typically see. These would be facilities that would resemble buildings that would be of more of an industrial nature, and they've also been used to as conversions of retail space as well. So we've been seeing more of this around the region over the last few years as the need for this type of product increased and marginal commercial areas have become available in which this use could be conducted within it. So we were approached by the owners of County Crossroads, Ed Reimer, on being able to have climate-controlled storage in a few places within that development. I'll note that tonight what we're asking for is an amendment to the code. The items that we'll be showing related to Ed Reimer's proposal are just that, a proposal at this point. If the Planning Commission, the council were to enact the changes within the code, then Mr. Reimer could come back with plans specific to the development because then they would be permitted at that point. But as for these purposes here, they're meant to show a project that could happen within the development. And so right now under the zoning code, the C4 district, storage uses as a primary use is not permitted, and that's been in the code for quite some time here. If you're going to be having storage uses as a primary use, we have allowances for that within the industrial district. And when we take a look at the C4 district itself, the areas in which it encompasses, it's generally the County Crossroads area, which is that area by Colburns near 33rd Street between 61 and 316. That's zone C4, the Westview Mall area, and then the commercial development adjacent to General Sieben Drive and Highway 55. Those are the C4 districts that we have in town right now and would be subject to the change if the amendment was approved. Now specifically what we're looking at for the amendment is that we provide a definition for climate-controlled storage, which states it's a storage facility characterized by individual, separate storage spaces which are accessible by customers for the storing and retrieval of personal effects and household goods. Storage spaces are climate-controlled to provide a regulated temperature. So it defines that these are a climate-controlled facility for individual customers. In the allowance within the C4 district, it would be a permitted use or a use by right as proposed. There would be a couple provisions within that. One of them would be the storage activity would need to be conducted entirely within a building. There would not be any exterior storage or use of accessory buildings, pods, trailers to do the use. It would have to be fully contained within the building itself. Within a single occupant building, it could be conducted in single occupant buildings. They would need to be 20,000 square feet or less. You couldn't have anything larger than 20,000 square feet as a single occupant building within this district. For multiple occupant buildings, the buildings must not comprise 50% of the total building or greater than 20,000 square feet. The purpose in putting those provisions in is to limit the scope of climate-controlled storage in larger buildings. For example, the Target building, 130,000 square feet, without any provisions for space. Presumably, someone could come in and convert the entire structure if the market conditions were satisfactory to climate-controlled storage. What the code here would state is that there's a limitation on that to as much as 50% or 20,000 square feet. So that limitation is placed upon there. When you take a look at areas right now that have climate-controlled storage, a few examples I had in your packet, and I'll share here as well. The first one I got here is in Roseville, near the Rosedale Mall. This is southeast of Highway 36 in Fairview. So 36 is here, the Rosedale Shopping Center on the other side. This former Sports Authority building within the strip center here now is a climate-controlled storage space. An example of taking a marginal retail area and converting it into something else. They also have ones that have been built out of the ground new for these type of facilities. Probably the best example around that I've seen is this one here in West St. Paul. This is located just off of Robert Street on Moreland Avenue in a commercial zone district. So the areas that I'm showing you are retail commercial zoned. And so this was a new building that was constructed, I think, a year or two ago to meet those needs, as well as this one over here in Woodbury, located just behind the Target in Woodbury off of Woodbury Drive. So a couple local examples of what these would look like. You know, they're certainly different than what you would see as your traditional mini storage type of facilities here. So we did have the Planning Committee of City Council review the concept of this at a couple of different meetings in June and July. They recommended that the Planning Commission review an ordinance to consider the change, and so we have that before you tonight. So at this time, this is a public hearing. You can open it at this time, or I can stand for any questions. Thanks.
We'll open the public hearing now. If anyone would like to speak, please come up to the podium and state your name and address.
So I've got questions for John. Should I wait till after this? All right.
Did you want to speak?
My name's William Lean. I'm with Cushman & Wakefield. I live at 6111 Ollinger Boulevard in Edina. And I just wanted to say thank you for having this meeting this evening, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Any other comments? If seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments or questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask.
Commissioner Siebenholer.
Thank you. Do you happen to have a map of the current C4 areas?
You know, I should have included that. I do not, but
So I just need you to go over them again.
sure. Let me do it. Let's see. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna back out this map here of the city here in general. So 61, Highway 55 here. So as you go down Highway 61, this area here along 33rd Street near Colburn's, the hotel, the Vermilion Bank, that area is Zone C4. Everything else along Vermilion Street here is not Zone C4. Downtown is not Zone C4. Same thing going west on Highway 55. The C4 district there starts along the Westview Mall area between Westview Drive and Pleasant Drive, you know, everything from the McDonald's all the way over to Super America, and then continues west at General Sieben Drive and Highway 55, including the former Target, the Cub area, and Walmart.
I'm wondering why an overall code change versus like a special use for their purposes.
Within the code itself, the uses are identified as either uses permitted, which means they're uses by right. You can go ahead and do them without any special permission, or by special use permit. And so in order to establish the ability for one to get a special use permit, you would need to amend the code to add that provision. Now, we looked at that and thought, okay, is this something that should be a special use permit within the districts? Generally, with a special use permit, you're setting conditions on operations. I couldn't think of anything really specific that we would want to review individually for the operations of these facilities. So I proposed to go forward as them to be a use by right within the district. Generally, with a special use permit, it's something in which you want to set conditions to ensure that it operates in conjunction with the neighbors, because the individual characteristics of that operation may differ from one to another.
So, okay, let me make sure I got all my thoughts together. So so it's currently a C4 and I just want to be clear, it's currently a C4 in this area. And, let's see, so the C3. So if this was to go where it should right now without any code change, what district would it fall under?
Right now, the only district in which storage can be done as what we term a primary use, meaning that it's the only operation going on or the main operation going on, is within the industrial district, which is essentially the industrial park.
So help me understand what this opens these other areas to. Because clearly it's going to, if it's an overall change, then all these areas are, okay, so when something like this goes on, I guess I'm kind of going all over the place, I apologize. Because this is a code change, who gets notified with something like this for areas surrounding?
With a code change like this, there's no individual notification. There's public notification of the paper and the website, but no mailed notification that occurs.
So paper and website. How are those timed? Has it been a while, or?
I think you need to give at least 10 days notice on both of those.
Ooh, 10 days from the print of the newspaper until today.
10 days prior to the public hearing date of today. So it would have to have been posted at least 10 days ago from today.
Okay, so, yeah, on the website and the paper, obviously also.
Right.
So I guess feel like I don't know enough about what's changing for these other areas besides this cold storage, or temperature-controlled stuff.
Do you have concerns, Commissioner, as to where in the city this might have an effect?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah,
It
and
would-
what effects, because we are opening up the whole area, the C,
Sure.
all the C4.
Right. So the code itself would be limited to those areas zoned C4, so those areas that I had pointed out previously. The other areas of the city would not be affected by this. So any building or new building within those C4 areas with this change, they could have climate-controlled storage within them.
So it's strictly the climate control aspect that is being asked to be added.
Correct, yep. Definition added for what climate-controlled storage is, stating that within the C4 district, it's a permitted use, and it adds conditions or adds stipulations for the operation, including that no exterior storage or accessory buildings, and then limitations on the size of how much of the building or how large the building can be devoted to storage.
Okay. So the Sears area, what kind of a percentage is that of that total strip?
Of that one there, I'm just taking a guess based upon the drawing. It's probably close to 50%. Skip, is that kind of your recollection? Yeah, around 50% of that building,
here
of the
under.
strip mall, yes.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Barrs?
good. John, just to clarify the question about the special use permit, so it could go under a special use permit as an option?
Correct, Commissioner. Yeah, there's an option there that you could, instead of listing under uses permitted, listed as a special use within that district. If you listed it as a special use, that would require any climate control facility to come back to the planning commission and council for a special use permit prior to operation on that. I'll note that if it's a new building, it would, as it states right now, the site plan itself would need to come forward regardless. But as a use component of it, right now, it would not need to come before planning commission or council. They could operate that by right. If it were a special use permit, then that would need to come before planning commission and council on each individual instance.
So with it being a permitted use, no site plan review?
No, there would still be a site plan required
Okay.
if there is a new building construction. So for example, with what's being contemplated at County Crossroads, the conversion of the Sears space would not require a site plan.
Okay.
But the new building would.
Okay. And we, in the zoning ordinance, don't specify between or separate special use permit or conditional use permit? They kind of, are they interchangeable, or do we?
Interchangeable, yeah. There's some legal differences in it, but
Do we define both in our zoning ordinance, or only the SUP?
we just define special use permits. We haven't had the conditional use permit used much within the code.
So, I feel like you're a good resource for, the commercial aspect of development. With this affecting these other areas that, I mean, I see this and it's all speculative, so, I mean, yeah, this is whatever, but I mean, this to me is not really what's going on here, it's code change. So, in looking at that with, I mean, I don't know, I guess I'm concerned for the other businesses in this district, that is something that, I mean, it's clearly a different impact of the area. I mean, I could see where it would be a disadvantage for businesses that aren't like this to be next to a place that is like this. So, I mean, from a commercial tenant type analysis, does this reduce flow in a negative way for the businesses nearby?
I mean, I can definitely share my opinion, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
the few things, maybe one question for Skip, if we could. Does the development itself have any restricted use covenants on it? I mean, that used to be Walmart, you got Colburn's in there. Do they have to approve a storage facility getting built on an outlot?
We did not, but.
No?
To help allay what you were asking about, Lisa, Ed, as the landlord of the property, was also very conscientious about this. He's approached each of the tenants and said, how would you feel about this? All of the tenants that are currently existing there have all signed, a statement that said, yes, we would rather have, mini storage use here than no use there. It's better than not having something along those lines. The letter is, not written quite that way. It's just, yes, we would like to see the mini storage use here. And we've got a group that, we're talking with right now, sending a proposal out in the adjacent vacant space, that knowing that the mini storage is there, they said that's great, we're thrilled to do that. And this would be a, fitness type operator that would be moving in a juice bar of sorts. So too much detail. So it isn't impacting people's desire to move into the location. It's not impacting anything else, but it is seen as desirable from the co-tenants in the center. Better to have something than not have anyone in that.
So is that available for us to see?
Which one?
The ones where the people signed saying that they were in agreement?
Yes, they actually were presented at one of the earlier, council or planning commission meetings, and, I would be able to get you copies of those. I don't have those with me tonight, though.
Yeah, Commissioner, there was some concept plans that were included as part of the planning committee review, and I think they included those within your packet as well, the information they had submitted on that. So they had included, a potential site plan which showed a new building just behind the Super America building, between the Super America and the Coburn store, and then a conversion of how the Sears would look. Essentially, the Sears space, you'd walk in the doors like you normally do. Within there would be individual areas that people would rent out that would be locked, that they could access their goods from that way. And then within that too, within that article listed as Reimer Companies, they have shown a couple of examples of what a climate-controlled storage building would look like in other places. So give some ideas of that. Again, with new construction of this type of building, it would require site plan approval, so we'd look at the individual plans and details at that time.
Yeah. I guess do you have any more thoughts?
I guess my other thoughts are, my only concern is, I mean, the examples we're looking at here and the references here are, you know, more urban, dense populations. You know, the Woodbury is shadowing a Target, and it's basically an industrial park behind it. You know, I mean, is that truly a commercially zoned area, or are they in an industrial park?
Yeah, I looked at that too, and it actually is zoned commercial back there.
Okay. You know, I'd say the same thing for Robert Street area. I mean, super dense population ring. You know, so I can see it supporting those. They're usually more of a behind positioning than an outlot of a retail. I mean, it doesn't, as a retail developer, that doesn't feel very good to me. I mean, I would be concerned with what that says about, you know, Colburn's viability, and probably more so what it does to open up the other C4 areas. I think it can be done well. I like it more when it's, you know, not up front and center. I mean, they're destination uses. I mean, commercial corridors are convenience, necessity uses. How often do you go to your storage shed once you unload it? Every 4 years. I mean, not really a necessity-driven deal. Maybe Skip, could you comment on why the bifurcation between, I mean, is it mainly just to fill the other dead space in the Sears versus having them tied together, or is that like a sales off? Will that be staffed at all? Do they have staff?
Hey,
Or is
Skip.
it all automation?
Can you come up here, please? Thanks.
Commissioner Rob, it would not be staffed, it'd be run like the 24/7 fitness type locations like Snap Fitness. So you would have a fob to get into the space. It would always be locked, it'd always be well lit, it's always gonna have security right there. It's only loading through the front, you're not doing any loading through the back on that. In today's society with the millennials wanting to keep stuff closer, it's not driving to an industrial park. This is a Class A application where you've got the temperature control, so it's not just cold storage where people are leaving stuff and abandoning it. The thought process behind doing this is the company that would be running it is a professional company out of Arizona that have been aggregating a lot of these storage locations. So that's what they're looking to do is, Hastings doesn't have any Class A temperature controlled storage at this point, and they're not inclined to be in the industrial parks for the most part. Even as you drive through Cottage Grove and you're coming to Hastings from Cottage Grove on the right, you've got the new one that's all, the building is brick, you've got glass, it's well lit, and you see the storage units behind there. Maple Grove, where they took the space behind where Target relocated, and what they did was they put storage behind in that building along the back there. Just again, in these commercial districts for convenience for people to get to. So it's a upscale, professional kind of storage is what it is these days.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Martin.
I guess taking the totality of circumstances together, I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit here. I think that the special use option would suffice down the road if the situation permits. I share the same reservations Commissioner Barst does on the other districts. Director Hinsman brought up Target. Seeing that building potentially cut up and segmented out for other uses, I don't think would be in the best nature of the city nor that space. The other point I'd like to mention is that the Vermillion Street Corridor plan points out that a lot of the land out in the county crossroads could be converted in the future into residential use, so, I would raise the question on how much somebody would wanna potentially develop nor build next to a facility like that, and I'm sorry, I have to point out that the industrial park is literally across the street from where this is, so I know it's two separate products, it's temperature controlled, but there's storage facilities that are 500 feet away, so, and I think the reason Hastings hasn't had this product in the past is because we're far enough out, there's enough space with our homes, different than Woodbury, much more dense. People are living in townhomes, apartments, whatnot. They don't have the space that single-family homes in Hastings offer. So I think it's a different climate out here, if you will. So, not against it by any stretch. I'm just thinking here that completely rewriting the ordinance for something that's proposed is a little bit aggressive, given the implications that it may pose down the line, so.
If I may, Commissioner Martin, what Hastings is going to look like is what Woodbury looked like at one point in time as well. The Vermillion Street corridor that you're talking about with the residential that's proposed on the vacant site, this is a wonderful co-tenancy as far as what residents in apartments like you see would like to see. Demographically, there are, the families that aren't just in, townhomes and apartments that are also looking for additional storage from time to time. And we're not opposed to being able to go with a special use permit for this particular situation. The meetings that we had in June and July they'll lend themselves to go in this direction to make sure that, as you were talking about Target being carved up, the 130,000 square foot box won't be converted to storage, similar to like Home was back in the day in Roseville, for instance. With the provisions that John has put together, it does limit how big and how a project can come about. So it does actually help, as opposed to somebody coming in and asking for 130,000 square feet of mini storage, temperature controlled mini storage.
Commissioner.
Quick question, thanks for coming tonight, by the way. A quick question on the definition, 155.02, where it says, accessible by customers for storing retrievable personal effects and household goods. How do you regulate that to make sure that a business, for example, like a small business, isn't going to use that for the storage of tools or supplies and kind of use that as kind of an outlet, which would create additional traffic? And since this is primarily in a residential area, even though it's a commercial property, it's surrounded on three sides by residential.
Yep.
So how do you prevent that from an operational standpoint?
Commissioner Messina, what I would say is that the definition, I'm sure, could be, I don't know where the definition came from, but that could certainly be adjusted. Part of where this, the conversation had gone, there were concerns that, as you were talking about now, that somebody would move into a large facility and open up the, have it for their business storage and so forth. And to your point earlier, Commissioner Martin, you have 500 feet away the industrial where the cold storage is. That's where most people are gonna take their product in there. There's a different price point for it. In terms of monitoring it, really, it's gonna be the market saying, nope, we're not gonna go in there. There were some concerns that it would displace the other tenants that were in there, and that's again why we reached out to each of the tenants that way. And the type of product that people are gonna store would be, by nature, just household goods. They're not gonna rent 3 storage facilities next to each other and start, running their business, their auto parts and so forth out of there. So if that helps answer the question, that's, I'm sure, something that could be much better regulated, and we could certainly put something in there with the company that's gonna be looking after this.
Okay, yeah, that would be something, I'd want to see looked at further, just because of the way where it's located. You've got houses to the south, you've got houses across the street, 316 is gonna undergo a complete renovation in a few years, within a few years. So there's a lot of things happening in there, and the concept that was brought forward, this drawing, with the
Yes.
one building that's in the middle of the outlot,
Yes.
is there a reason, I know that this is just a conception, okay, and I get, or a conceptual drawing, but is there a reason that building is out there in the middle by itself and not necessarily attached to the strip mall itself as a continuation of it, or a redo of the actual existing strip mall? And I know that, again, it's just a conceptual drawing and it's not up for discussion today, but it does help me kind of frame where we're going with the ordinance change.
Understood. And the thought process behind that, with Coburn's, being in the center, very successful, next to the Crossroads Church, which is very successful, the expansion spaces off to the side is no longer a logical candidate to put it because the church may want to use that, and they are currently using it for their playground and so forth. The two outlots, Outlot A and Outlot B that you see out front there, ideally, we want to see a higher, better fit for a restaurant-type use for Outlot B. And given that this would be, behind Super America, another outlot in the front there, and given the parking and so forth, it just lent itself well to being constructed at that particular location. But again, subject to the city and what they would like to see.
Okay. So the, where it says climate storage here,
Yes,
where Sears is,
yes.
that area, you can't expand beyond that and redo that whole area and just build onto it and keep it all in the one area versus the two separate?
I would say part of the rationale behind that, again, goes back to wanting to keep less than 50% of a building climate-controlled storage, and we don't want to displace the existing tenants. We don't want to, tell Snap, we want to put storage in here, so, when your lease comes up, sorry, guys, or anything like that. The existing tenants are very important to us, to the landlord as well.
Okay. And again, I'm concerned, I know none of it was a public hearing, and John, you said there were no individual notices?
That's correct.
Okay.
No individual notices sent out.
Because Outlot A and B are directly across the street from those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 area, residents, main residents. And that area there also sees an intense amount of traffic, and accessibility is a major issue in and out of that center to begin with. Taking a left turn takes about 10, 15 minutes during rush hour as it is. And so, and I know that storage facilities aren't frequented, people aren't going in and out all day, but still it does add an additional strain on that area as far as possible increased traffic, which is why I brought up the business issue, people operating a business out of there. And I have seen it, yes, in the cold storage and in the industrial park. They're all practically businesses in those huge storage areas. And I was just wondering, what's to keep somebody from starting, keeping supplies in a climate-controlled storage facility versus with the cold storage?
Right.
That's where I was going with that.
Understood.
Yep. So that would be my only major concern there.
Thank you. Thank you.
John, I have a question. Typically, there's a staff recommendation listed on these things. Was there any recommendation from staff on this?
Yeah, I didn't realize I didn't have it on there. I'm staff and I am supportive of the change on here. When I was first approached with the concept here, I was a little bit hesitant towards the change on here. The way that I approach this is to determine what sort of harm a change might do to the area or other businesses on here. I go from the standpoint of I want to be able to allow the maximum freedom for businesses to operate and thrive, but certainly want to be protective of any negative impacts. And so I took a look at what was around in other cities and other codes. There seems to be more of these occurring that I had noticed in the past in areas of very similar nature. But I wanted to put some limitations on it for the size of it, so we didn't have very large climate-controlled storage areas or buildings with those uses within it. So I am supportive of the change on it. When you take a look at County Crossroads, I agree with Commissioner Messina's standpoint that 33rd Street and Highway 316 access is difficult, albeit down the road with the 316 improvements, hopefully that'll be better. Whether you take a look at this type of use, this is probably one of the least traffic intensity uses you'd have for a commercial district. So looking at development possibilities, could be a positive. When you take a look at the Vermillion master plan or the Vermillion Street plan we did on here, you've got a situation here where you've got the Colburn's building, you've got the commercial of Super America right there in the large parking lot. I look at that as having a longer-term commercial viability. When you take a look at the large vacant lands to the west and the south there, I see those as having very little commercial viability, and that being areas in which the residential conversion per that plan would be most likely to occur on that.
I guess I kind of have similar concerns as some of the other commissioners have stated as well, in the fact that we're making a change across the board for this C4, and we don't really know what the unexpected consequences could be in the other C4 areas. While we're making a change in this particular one for this, and in this particular area, you know, I don't really necessarily have a problem with that. But again, are we opening up for some unexpected consequences in some of the other C4s? Because now we're opening that up to them as well. The other concern I do have, like you said, the other areas around that commercial area is most likely going to be residential. So now are we going to be limiting the amount of commercial that'll be able to go into that area because we're allowing this in there too? We don't have a crystal ball to really know what's going to happen down the road, but I just have that concern, you know, making that a global change, I guess. Commissioners, any other comments?
I'd like to at least make the comment that these things are rampant. I mean, they are everywhere, popping up every minute. I drive around the Twin City area a lot, and these things are prevalent, and they're large, and they're, I personally am not in favor of putting this in everybody's faces all over the city, the potential. When we've got space in the industrial park, and it's a very appropriate place for something like this to be. You know, special use permit, and, you know, I guess that's probably where we'll go if this doesn't go through, but, you know, at this point, I'm just not in favor of it, that's all.
Commissioners, any other comments? Questions? Otherwise.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Bryce.
One other question for you, John. Just based on that last comment, have there been any discussions about potential height restrictions as well? I mean, it seems like this is more of a boutique. Is this single story contemplated, is what it appears, right? You know, so I don't think, again, that this is necessarily the issue, but those ones that are popping up all over the cities, I mean, I would say some cities are going the opposite way too. That I'm active discussions with about buying land from them. They've had some pop up on Highway 100 and 694. They're big. They underestimate the size. They're going the other way with their codes. Again, I mean, I'm not saying this item that we have in front of us is necessarily that, because this is a lot smaller what we're talking about. But I would agree with what I'm hearing is that I think the most favorable option is for us to look at a special use, permitted use, and then it's a case, so then it would just become a case-by-case basis then, John?
It would be. Now, with a special use permit, when you have a special use permit within a code, it's to set conditions of operation. It's presumed that the operation can occur if conditions are put on it. So you may be at a disadvantage to necessarily deny it on a case-by-case basis. It's more what specific conditions may you place on the application so that it could work within the district. So there's a little bit of nuance there. So I mean, with a special use permit, it's difficult for a city to be in the position to say yes to one and no to the other. It's more, for this to operate, you would need to set these conditions to ensure that it's in harmony with the surrounding area.
So does that mean that staff would have to come back with stipulated conditions that would have to be met to allow a special use
It
permit to
would
come into
be,
play?
yeah, and that's kind of where I hesitated a bit on having a special use permit. I'm just thinking, well, what would those conditions be
Right.
in situations like this? And I don't know, there might be ones I'm not thinking of, but,
So, Mr. Chair.
Commissioners, any other questions? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to deny the proposed amendment to the Hastings City Code, Chapter 155 zoning, allowing climate-controlled storage uses within the C4 zoning district.
Commissioners, we have a motion on the table to deny the current request. Do we have a second?
I'll second for further discussion. John, just to dig in deeper on this special use piece then, I mean, so what's the process from here? I mean, it kind of feels like everyone's saying the same thing, that if it's gonna be an option, that we need to figure out how to make it a special use permit. So does that mean, I mean, what do we do from here? Do you
Yeah.
guys take it and then it comes back to us with potential
Sure.
conditions?
yeah, Commissioner, I don't have any issue with identifying this as a special use permit within the C4 district itself. Now, as far as any additional language changes within the amendment, I don't know if there would be any. What this would do is, if it was approved, would be if a building came forward for a climate-controlled storage facility, it would come forward to the planning commission and to the city council. Staff would review that individual facility. They may set individual conditions of operation for that facility as part of the permit.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I guess this is, so, this is no storage except for climate control.
Correct.
What's the purpose of that? What's the difference between no climate control and climate control?
Commissioner, I think we want to make sure that this is within a temperature-controlled heated building, as opposed to a mini storage unit where it's a much lower standard of construction. It may not be something that would be consistent with other commercial buildings. When you're talking about a climate-controlled storage facility, that would be similar to any other commercial building in which, you know, it's built to sit in a certain way in which the temperature is regulated in there. It may perhaps lend itself to the conversion of something else in the future as well. I mean, at the moment, there seems to be a growth in the climate-controlled industry. Perhaps sometime in the future, that may become something different. When you have a mini storage building, the opportunity to convert that to something else is quite limited because it's just a structure with no utilities and very basic.
Any other comments, questions?
I guess I don't understand taking away, yeah, I'm not for it, obviously. But when I see that it's specifically taken out as climate controlled only, to me, that takes away an element of competition. I guess I don't, yeah, it doesn't matter really in the long run because I'm not in favor of it.
Commissioner?
Thank you again. The outlot B, I realize that we're not looking at the plan concept here, but I'm just trying to frame this in my head as far as future, what this could do. And the outlot B, you said, would be potentially a separate building,
Yes,
like a restaurant or something similar? That's what your goal is?
correct.
If this were to go through, so would that still be an option even if this doesn't go through? Is this,
We will continue to market the property
Okay.
as, for any type of use. This is just the use and the demand that we've seen now for the neighborhood on that part, which I know, video stores back in the 1980s were a new concept, but they, had a life cycle and so forth all the way through. Same thing, we still are looking for, the right business, the right fit for the outlot B, for any of the spaces within the shopping center. And if, approved in 5 years from now, it's a concept that doesn't work, what's nice is it can be retracted. We're not doing anything different with the existing building, the existing shopping center. The architecture that's there stays in place. With the new Outlot A climate-controlled building, the same construction standards are going to apply that, John and the city has, as far as, it's got to, conform to certain construction techniques, windows, masonry, blocks, and so forth. So it's not putting up a pole building in the middle of a parking lot along those lines. So it does, it lends itself to a nice look along those lines. And to your point, Commissioner Barss, it's a single-story, nice-looking, building on that part to complement it. The owner of the property certainly doesn't want to cause any damage to, his own property, to the community, to the neighboring areas as well. So, as far as the thought process behind it.
John, are the other two C4 areas, are they directly adjacent to other residential properties like this one is?
Commissioner, I would think that they would be adjacent to residential in some fashion or another. Again, with the restrictions that are being proposed today, I guess there's two restrictions. One that we would impose, which would be a 20,000 square foot max on the size of the facility. The other one would be the market itself. I mean, I don't know how much of a market there would be within Hastings for multiple types of these developments. I mean, would there be another one? Perhaps. Would there be 10 of them? I don't know if the market would support that.
Okay. Because this one, it's right up against those residents. This is on two sides here, so, and I know nobody's here from those residents to speak tonight. I'm almost thinking that.
Because we're
I need-
looking at this property here, I believe, if I'm looking at this upside down, yes, the one behind Super America. So this would be the one that would be proposed for a new construction if the ordinance amendment went through. So you've got homes that are on the other side of Highway 316, Red Wing Boulevard here, that right now, are facing the parking lot at this location. So this would be further in from that.
And just to clarify again, they did not receive individual notices of this public hearing, it was just published.
Correct.
See, I guess it would have been a little bit easier for me to make a decision had we had direct notification for those residents of what potentially could happen, so we could hear from them. Maybe they didn't see it or something like that. I'm not quite sure how that works, if that's something that can be tabled. Can you table it pending individual notification? Can we request that? Or even if it's not required, how does that work?
Well, Commissioner, we haven't as a practice done that with ordinance amendments, notified individual property owners of that, so that's been our practice. Could that change? Sure. But that's been our practice.
Okay. I guess I would probably make it a little bit more comfortable, for me anyway, to make that determination, because the other C4 properties aren't as affected as this one is because of their location and their proximity to other retail versus this one, which is right up against the two neighborhoods. So, all right, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm not as concerned with that simply because it is a commercial location. I think people knew that could be developed at any point and any time. That's probably less, imposing than some other commercial things could be. So I'm just more concerned about the other areas. But Commissioners, we currently have a motion on the table, seconded. Did you have something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, it was on that note, John, with that motion on the floor, do we have to vote on that, or could we propose an amendment to the ordinance amendment in front of us that states anything stipulated outside of what's allowed in a C4 has to be a special use permit? That's something we could approve tonight on a special use.
Sure. Procedurally, with the motion and second on the floor right now, amendments can be proposed and voted on individually on that. What I would suggest is if the nature of the amendments is substantially different from what's being, what the nature of the motion is, the nature of the motion is now for denial. So that appears to me as a pretty straightforward motion. If the vote is taken and then it does not receive a majority, then other motions can be brought forward. The other option on that one is the maker of the motion and the seconder could rescind the motion. I think those are the options before us.
Okay, thanks for that, and I just wanted to, thank Skip and just make it known, I don't necessarily, and I think other commissioners have touched on this, see it directly here as being an issue. I just think opening it up citywide is more kind of where my head is at. So that's kind of where I'm going with this special use, sub-point in that C4 district being proposed versus completely changing the C4 and allowing this citywide. So
Okay.
I guess I'll leave it to Commissioner Barce or Stephen Aller on that. So.
Okay, so just to offer some further clarification on this, so we have the motion, second on the floor right now for a recommendation to deny. So upon the vote, if you vote yay on this one, you're voting to recommend denial of that. If there is a majority of the planning commission that would vote yay on that recommendation for denial goes forward to the city council. If upon the vote here, there's not a majority, then other motions consistent to what Commissioner Martin is suggesting could be offered. I know that's a bit confusing.
Mr. Chair, if I could, just one other question for you then, John. I keep going back to the special use, conditional use. I mean, so do we have a definition of conditional use permit in the city? And is that a more applicable definition of what we're saying here? Because I mean, the operations does not seem to be the issue of trying to dictate like we did with the brewery related to their operations of the brewery, and they needed a SUP. This feels more like you got a coffee guy that wants a drive-through and needs a conditional use for a drive-through. And that comes before planning commission and city council.
Yeah, we've used the term special use permit and conditional use permit interchangeably in there. Specifically within the ordinance definitions, I'd have to check to see how that's defined, but we've used them interchangeably.
Okay.
I know most other cities, probably 90% of the cities out there use conditional use permit. We, for some reason, have historically used special.
Okay, but they're not defined differently of what we're allowing or approving, because it seems like you've brought up a few times that it's specific to operational perspective of, what we're approving, not the actual use of the property itself.
Yeah, I mean, under state statutes, there is a technical definition between a special use permit and a conditional use permit. I don't believe they're terribly substantial.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks. I guess I'm gonna bring this up again because I'm a little perplexed as to why this is being proposed to change so specifically the type of building when you're also, I don't care for the fact that it's so specific to a climate control facility when it could be, why does it matter, when we've got building code for aesthetics for every building in the city to be sure that it looks okay? I don't like that, of why it why it's so specific in the code change when it's more of a broad building business. They're so similar in ones that aren't climate control compared to ones that are, so, that's another part of this that I think needs to be looked at closer to to make sure that we're keeping competition and the ability, not just for climate control, if that's what's going on.
Yeah, and I could address a little bit of that too, Commissioner. I mean, you are correct in that this amendment is in response to a specific request that has been brought before the city, absolutely on that. We've had situations that have occurred similar to that every once in a while over time. The way I approach these things is to take a look and see what the negative consequences may be for this type of operation. In my opinion, I believe it's something that can operate within the district under these restrictions and not cause much harm to neighboring businesses, neighboring areas. But that's for the specific nature of it. I would not be in favor of mini storage within the C4 district, specifically because the building quality of a C4 district is the building quality of a mini storage facility that's not climate controlled does not lend itself whatsoever to redevelopment. It would need to be completely torn down and scraped for anything else to occur. You would not be able to reuse it for any other type of building.
I think too, just to add on to that a little bit, when the ordinance was originally done, climate-controlled storage wasn't even a thing at that point. So the C4 was explicitly stated that storage uses could not be part of it, probably because of that fact, that it was just outdoor, it was subpar from other commercial and so forth. That's why it was specifically prohibited in a C4. Now they're coming back, because of the nature of this new type of storage, it can fit in more of a commercial area because of the way it's built, because of the different things. And that's why they're saying, okay, now we're saying this type of storage is what they're picking out, just the climate controlled.
Mm-hmm. So that leads me to want to ask, I'm very glad that you're on this committee. What's your opinion on being able to use it if somebody vacants it, abandons it, well, whatever you want to call it, it needs to be used for a different purpose?
I think that's a
ability.
great question. I don't know if I know enough of, the construction type and what they're planning for it.
What I was specifically thinking of when I asked you that is if it was a mini storage and there was no climate control built into the building, is that really, I would suspect, I mean, when I think of things, I think, if there's a will, there's a way. I mean, you have to, money matters, obviously, but, I mean, the structure's still there. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think probably tough reuse if we're comparing to like up in Prescott, what they're building, the traditional mini storage pull sheds, let's call them.
Sure.
I mean, I would say this is a completely different building type and asset. And maybe, to Commissioner Martin's point, John, is it appropriate then for me to rescind my second if, we're having other discussions of potential other motions on there, or?
I believe so.
I mean, is that appropriate if that's?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so I would like to do that to allow
Okay.
for other motions to come back
Okay,
on the
so
floor.
at this point, Commissioner, I guess you could ask if there's any other individual who would wish to second the original motion on the floor by Commissioner Siebenthaler.
Okay, commissioners, is there any other second, since we had the original one rescinded on the current motion to deny? Seeing none, then that fails now.
Yeah, that
We
would
have-
fail for lack of a second, so it would be
Fails.
open for any other
Yep.
actions.
We're open for another motion.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Martin,
Make a motion to amend ordinance 155.32 C4 Regional Shopping Center. Any uses not specifically defined in that ordinance apply for a special use permit that would require commission and council approval before being issued.
May I ask for a clarification on that one? Are you, Commissioner, are you talking specifically about climate-controlled storage facilities? I guess I'm trying to determine the intent.
Yeah, any use that would not fall under a C4 zoning. So climate-controlled storage facilities would be one of those uses, I suppose.
Yeah, because I'm trying to determine how wide-ranging you intend the motion to be with that. Maybe I'm just not following it on that one.
Does that already exist?
Well, within the
The
code,
ability to-
within the code itself, we've got specific uses within the C4 district that are identified as permitted uses. Means you can do them outright, no other approvals required. And then we have uses by special permit. And so, the way that the code amendment is written here today, climate-controlled storage would be a use permitted. There's been discussion tonight that perhaps that should be under the special use permits, or be under the uses by special permit, so that a review of that would occur on each individual proposal by the planning commission and council.
So would we have to amend 155.02 then, under definitions?
I don't think so, unless you had a specific amendment to that definition.
Okay. So then, just for ordinance purposes, amending climate-controlled storage facilities for falling under a special use, requiring a special use permit, requiring a favorable vote by planning commission and city council.
All right. Thank you.
Can you read that back to
Sure,
us?
sure. The way that I,
In a more,
oh, no, the way I understand.
politically correct way, please.
Sure.
Thanks.
The way I understand the amendment here is that when you look at 155.32, where it says B uses permitted, it would be under, and I don't have the full ordinance here, it would be under uses by special permit. And that the language, climate-controlled storage, and then ABC would be moved to require a special use permit. Is that the intent?
Correct.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry for muddling
No
through that
worries.
so terribly.
No worries.
What's the ABC thing you were just talking about?
It's just the sub,
It's not
the
here. He said
subparts.
he doesn't have a copy of it here.
no, the ABC right there.
It's
the
a different
same.
section though, correct?
No, it's the proposed language, restrictions under climate-controlled storage under the draft ordinance.
Oh, so this, okay,
Yeah.
so it would just add, or it would take these out?
It would, the way I understand it is,
That would all stay in there
would-
under climate-controlled storage facility. It would just be instead of a permitted use, it would be a special use permit required.
So basically, the point is, going forward, if this was approved, is we want the ability to control
On a case-by-case.
on a case-by-case basis
Correct.
when and where these facilities can be built.
Correct.
Rather than just making a blanket
Just a
statement
blanket
across the
where they
board.
can, if they fit in the parameters there.
So by going with a special use permit, we're not necessarily denying
Right.
this part, we're just saying we'd like to consider it under a special use versus an amendment change.
Correct. And then they would have to, correct me if I'm wrong, John, they would have to come back when this is actually more formalized. Apply for that special use, we would see it again, vote on it then, it would go to council all over again.
you're right, yes.
Okay.
Just to summarize there, so if the amendment went forward so that a special use permit is required for climate-controlled storage, then any proposal for a climate-controlled storage facility, whether it would be a rehab of place within a strip mall or a new building itself, would need to come before the planning commission for review. And then there could be specific conditions set on the operation of that facility. Okay.
And that-
Commissioners?
Sorry, go ahead. And that's different than the proposal to the amendment, because that would allow the facility no matter what, but we would still have control over how it looks, where it goes,
That's unchanged, correct,
aesthetics, et cetera. So that doesn't change, so.
correct.
Even if I have reservations about the current proposal, it would still be something that could be addressed regardless if it was an amendment change or whether it was a special use
Yeah, there's,
permit.
what we're looking at here is specifically relating to the use of it.
Okay.
Now, when you're looking at a new building construction, that would fall under a site plan application, and then we would look at what the building would look like and those type of things.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that. I would like to amend that slightly just to, as far as the conditions set then, John, would those come back for us to review and comment on? As far as how they would be allowed under a special use permit? You know, I'm looking at the section right now, and so when they cover other areas, they'll have, the following shall be considered in granting a special use permit if they meet X, Y, Z.
Yeah, so what would happen here is any permit, any special use permit that would come forward would need to be to ABC, absolutely. And you would have the ability to set specific conditions on each individual property throughout the review.
Perfect, thank you.
Commissioners, we have a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll take a vote. I'm sorry. We have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That motion prevails.
And then was there nays on that? I didn't hear anything audibly.
Nope, no nays.
It was unanimous, okay.
Unanimous.
Got it, okay, thank you. Then I will, what happens with this is we will go forward to the city council. There'd be a first reading on the draft at the August 19th meeting, and then the public hearing would be scheduled for Tuesday, September 3rd, and then any final action at that point. And again, with what's being proposed here, any subsequent actions related to County Crossroads here would then come back as a special use permit to here. So you'd be able to look at that specifically at that time. So, thank you.
Thank you, John. Next item on the agenda, other business.
Mr. Chair, I can provide an update on a couple of actions here. At the last city council meeting, they did review the special use permit request to allow for the first floor residential at 213 Sibley Street, the Riviera Theater. They agreed with the planning commission, and denied the application. The applicant was not present at that meeting. He did share a couple of things prior to the meeting, but that one has been denied, so that one is over with. As far as other things coming forward here, where we've made some progress in the last month or so on the property just south of Walgreens where Caribou Coffee is proposed to go there, the property that we sold, a year and a half, 2 years ago. They've come to final agreement with Walgreens on access stuff that's been holding them up for quite some time. Talking to the developer, we should be seeing site plans for that very shortly. So at an upcoming meeting, we'll have that coming forward, which will be good. We continue to work on what's now termed the Confluence development, which is the former development of the Hudson facility here. We are working diligently to try to get actions for that before the city council on the 19th related to our development agreement. There's some dates that are set to expire at the end of this year, and we'd be amending that. We also have a better idea of how the project would progress and timeframes for the project. So at this point, we've approved all the landscape plans and the grading plans. We've had a pre-con meeting, and they're looking to dig dirt August 20th out there. So you'll be seeing action out on the park area. Within the building itself, we expect that they'll be starting work within the building in September, and that'll begin with some work to allow us to finalize our environmental obligations by doing some construction within the building, and then they would take over from there. And with the opening, with the finishing of the hotel, the apartments, banquet facility, and at least the shell for the tenants in there, for the other tenants, by the end of 2020. So things will finally start moving on that one, so we're looking forward to that.
So what was the date amendment?
What's that?
What was the date amendment coming through? What date
Oh, what date? Right now,
or what, reason, or what date frame?
yeah, right now, the existing agreement requires them to be substantially completed by December 15th of this year, which you'd have to move mountains to do that. So this would push that out till December of 2020. There's been some complications with the project in a lot of cost issues early on that the developers worked very diligently to work through plans so that it could become a project that can move forward. I mean, I think we're in a situation with that one where it would not, had it been another developer, it would not have surprised me if they would have said, I can't do this, and went away. But they made a commitment to do this project. Took them a little more, took them extra time, but we're very comfortable right now where we're at.
Commissioners, any other questions, comments? Seeing none, we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
A second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
All right.
We're adjourned.